Welcome to Success Redefined with Dr. Tony Warner. I'm Dr. Tony, mom of 5, psychotherapist, author, and mentor. Here, you're going to find insightful discussions spanning science, psychology, and soul as the personal and professional meet, and we explore the intersection of what really matters. So success can be redefined with connection, healing, and fulfillment in mind. Hello, and welcome to this week's solo episode. I am sharing a bit from my own personal experience about some things that really helped me to navigate managing motherhood and mental health and work. And even if you're not a mom, managing parenthood or caregiverhood if you caregive for someone else in your family. This, I think, is a helpful conversation for us to have. We are still in the midst of our house extension. It was meant to be about a 10-week long project, and they officially started in May, and it is now, at the time of this recording, it's going to be September, like tomorrow. It's going to be September in a day or two. So clearly it's gone longer than 10 weeks. There have been some bumps along the way. Long story short, I am not in my office today doing the recording, which is where I usually am. So if you're tuning in to our conversation today on YouTube, you'll notice that my background is different today because of all the things that we have going on today. My office just was not available for me to be able to record in, and that brought me here to my 7-year-old's room. You'll see some Legos in the back. You see our summer schedule. I haven't taken it down yet. They just started school this week. Our summer schedule is kind of tacked up on his wall behind me. So a little bit of a tour back there of one of our kiddos' rooms this morning that you're getting, but that's why it looks different behind me if you are on our video tuning in visually today. But several times a week at least, I get asked, how do I do it? And typically I'm asked that question by women, particularly moms. Men don't tend to ask me that question, although sometimes they'll make a comment like, oh, wow, you've really got your hands full or something like that. And it's because I have multiple children. I have 5 children now, but even before I had 5 children, I was asked this question. So how do I do it? How do I navigate a fulfilling career in a field that I am very passionate about? How do I navigate that while also navigating parenthood and being a present, involved parent that I feel good about being, and also cultivating a marriage in a helpful and healthy way? How do I do that? And then also maintain my own mental health and make sure that I am taking care of myself. How do I manage all of that? I want to first say that I am not perfect at all in any of it. I slip up here and there. I certainly act out of alignment here and there, right? Like I certainly mess up sometimes, and I'm not going to pretend I've ever been perfect at it, nor will I pretend I'm ever going to be perfect about it. In fact, one of the things that helps me to navigate it all and enjoy it more and stress less is giving myself permission not to have to do it perfectly. Just letting that go, that it can't be done perfectly. And so I don't even need to work for that. I don't need to strive for that. And I think that in and of itself is something maybe we could all just breathe that in, permission to be imperfect. Breathe that in. Permission, not from me to you, but from you to you. Permission, can you give yourself permission to not strive for perfection? Strive for being present. Strive for being congruent with your core values as often as you can be. Strive for being open and willing to ask for and receive forgiveness when you kind of need to, right? But strive for perfection, no, we don't need to strive for perfection. And me saying this is just coming up organically right now. I don't even have it in my notes to say to you today, to share with you today. So there's something on my heart, something in my soul that wants me to say that. So whoever needed to hear that, perhaps maybe it was just me that needed to hear that and reflect on that. That's okay. I think we all need to be reminded of some things that our heart already has the wisdom for sometimes. And this is one of those things. You've heard time and time again, right? Like, no such thing as perfection. You can't be perfect. Even if you actually feel that internal pressure for perfection or actually receive messages from certain people that you should be perfect, you've also heard that it's not possible. And those are such contradictory statements. So how do we reconcile those? You get to decide if you're going to give yourself permission to be imperfect. You get to decide if in this moment you're going to give yourself permission not to have to strive for perfection. You get to decide that here and now. And then you get to decide it again and again and again and again and again for yourself. You get to decide that. And deciding that again and again and again, and then acting in accordance with that is going to help you ultimately feel better about the way you're showing up for things, about when you mess up for things. And also, it's going to help you be a really great role model, healthier role model for your children or for whomever you're leading in your life at home or at work, even for your partner. Because what you are saying is, I can't be perfect, and so I don't have to expect perfection from you. And what a sigh of relief that can bring. Doesn't mean I don't have expectations. I certainly do, but perfection is not one of them. All right, now I'm gonna bring myself back to my notes that I had that I wanted to share with you. That must have just been something really, really important for me to share, for it to come up so clearly and so strongly on my heart today. But since I get asked this question, how do you do it? How do you do it? From people I know, from strangers, from people online, from people in the grocery store. I get asked this question so often. And since I get asked this question so often, I thought that I would sit down and write out some of the things that help me do it, some of the essentials, the fundamentals. And I thought that this would be helpful for me too, for me to sit down and reflect on what really is being helpful to me. Um, I like to take that time to reflect. I certainly don't take that time to reflect as much now as I did pre-fifth baby, and I didn't take as much time to reflect during the fourth baby as I did prior to the fourth baby. And so the time that I set aside to reflect just with myself, it does ebb and flow. It does shift. I'm not super, super stringent. It has to be all of this time, all of these days, X, Y, that's too much pressure, right? It goes back to that pressure to be perfect. But reflection, self-reflection is something that I do have a commitment to, whether it's a little or a lot of it on any given day. Fine, it is what it is. But in and of itself, I do have a commitment to doing some kind of self-reflection for me, so that I can continue to learn, to grow, to evolve in a way that's helpful for my own self, and then also for the relationships that I show up with. So I wanted to sit down and reflect on this for me. And also, I wanted to sit down and reflect on this so I could share a super easy to access resource for when I get asked this question, so that I could say, you know what, I actually did an episode on this. Here you go. And someone can tune into it in whatever way they need to, whenever they need to. And it could be helpful for them. It can serve them in some way. So if that's you today, thank you for being here. Thank you for even asking that question. Not again because I have all the answers, but because there's a part of you that can feel that there is space for more balance, space for more fulfillment, space for more room to breathe in your life, in your body, in some way, some shape, some form. And if we don't ask the question, how can we expect to get an answer, right? How can we expect to get a relevant answer that could be helpful to us? So I'm glad that you're here. If that's who you are, asking that question and wanting to get the answer today. So I am not aiming for this episode to be some exhaustive list that I just read out to you or spew out to you and say, do this, do that, do this, do that. Honestly, I don't think that's helpful. I think that can kind of set up a precedent where we think, oh, someone else has all the answers. So if we just do what they do, then it's going to work for us. And then you know what? You're going to be really disappointed, because if I just tell you to do it the way that I do it, and then you try to implement it, it's probably not going to work, because you're a unique individual with unique circumstances and a unique history and unique children and unique relationships and unique strengths and gifts and challenges. And so am I. So exactly what I do and exactly how I do it is not necessarily what is going to be exactly helpful for you. And that's okay. It's not supposed to be. I want you to take what I shared today and customize it to you. I'm going to do my best to share it in a way that will hopefully inspire you to do that and provide some avenues for you to get curious about how you could do that for yourself and with yourself, rather than this to be like prescriptive and be like, oh, do this, check this off the list. Now this is going to work, and do this, check this off the list. All right, now got it. I just want to put that out there, because there's so much on the internet now that says, just do this and just do this, and then you get this, and then you get this. And when it comes to our emotions, like our emotional experience of something, our relational experience of people that we care about, and our perception of the world and all of these things, there's so much gray area that cookie cutter just isn't going to cut it. Okay, now there are formulas that can be helpful if you can customize them, and I do believe in that, to have some kind of fundamental formula idea, kind of theoretically have a framework there that you could customize. You can make it your own, and then that could work for you. But to just say, you just do exactly this and exactly this and exactly this, and you'll get this exact result. I caution that. I'm not on that train. I'm not on that train. And if you are, cool, but that's not what you're going to find here. So I'm just going to be real with you about that. Actually, what I'm going to do today is I want to highlight two essentials that came up first and foremost and strongest for me, and when I sat down to reflect on this today. And these two pieces of the puzzle, to these two fundamentals that I'm going to share with you today, they've evolved over time for me, and they will also evolve over time for you if they haven't already. But I'm going to share them with you today from my heart, my experience personally and professionally, hopefully to your heart, and speak to you and ask you to get curious about your experience and how this might fit in for you. All right. So let's go ahead and dive in. Here's what I've got. The first one is a practical one. It's one that you've probably heard of before, but I use it, I do it, I view it in a less than conventional way. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about how I do it differently than what most people expect or are used to. And the first one is scheduling. Intentional scheduling, purposeful scheduling. It's not about being super rigid or controlling everything and everyone. That's not what this is. It's also not just a long, tedious to-do list. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about scheduling. Some people are all about schedules, and other people are totally against them. For me, I've had different experiences with schedules over the course of my life. But what I have found is that if you schedule too rigidly, it does usually backfire. There's not enough space to breathe. There's not enough room for flexibility. And you have to have room for flexibility in order for a schedule to work. But also, if your schedule is too loose and undefined, it can also backfire, because it's not helping provide the boundaries, the accountability, and the support that you need built in to your day-to-day to help you stay focused and direct your energy in an intentional way. So there is an in-between, and what that in-between looks like for you, for me, can ebb and flow. It can look differently from each of us, for each of us. Back in the day when I would think of a schedule, I would think of my agenda books, right? Like the ones that you would get in school or the ones that you would purchase for yourself when you're in college. I loved my agenda books. I would color coordinate them. I would have this color highlighter for this, and I would have this section for this, and all of my classes and my work times and my assignments and my due dates, they were all written down inside, and it was all about getting things done. It was really about being as productive as possible, making sure I stayed on top of everything. Boom, 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 boom. That's what it was about. And, it did work for me. I won't say that it felt particularly fulfilling as I was experiencing what I was doing, but it did feel short-term gratifying in that I could check things off the list that I had completed, but immediately then I was moving on to the next thing on the list, right? I wasn't stopping to enjoy things. It wasn't about fulfillment. It wasn't about the way I want to experience things. It was really just about getting things done. That is not the type of scheduling I'm talking about here, right? The type of scheduling that I'm talking about here is not all about productivity. It's not all about rigidity. It's the kind of scheduling that I find to be most valuable and most helpful nowadays as a multifaceted mother, woman, wife, worker, community member. Like here's what I'm talking about. The kind of schedule that I implement now is one that focuses on helping me to direct my energy and my intentions and my attention in a very clear way so that I can experience more of what I want to experience within the day and within various sections of my day. So it's more relationally and experientially focused as opposed to being super bang, bang, bang productivity focused. Does that make sense? So I still include the things that I want and need to get done in my schedule, but that is not the primary or sole goal of what I mean by scheduling. So, for example, instead of asking, how can I fit everything into my schedule today? And then just looking at this laundry list, this unending laundry list of things that need to get done. And then ultimately feeling so much less motivated and more overwhelmed because there's so many things. How am I going to fit it all in? So I'm trying to squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it because my goal, my focus, my question is how can I fit it all in and get it all done, right? Instead of doing that, I'll ask myself something like, how do I want to experience my day today? That's a very different question. And then I'll follow that question up with, and how do I want to show up for my day today? For the things that I want to do, the things that I need to do, and the people that I interact with. These are different questions. They're still for scheduling, but can you feel the difference, right? Like ask yourself the first question, how can I fit everything into my schedule? Thinking about all the things I need to get done, all the things that I need to do, all of the people that need X, Y, or Z from me. How could I fit all of that in? Notice how you feel in your body when you ask yourself that question. Oh, I feel tense. I can feel the tension. My shoulders go up, my tightness in my back, my shoulders, like in my neck, I can feel it. But then when I ask myself this, and I would encourage you to ask yourself a variation of this question and notice what happens for you too. Okay. Ask yourself, how do I want to experience my day today? Oh, my shoulders just automatically relax. How do I want to show up for this day? How do I want to show up for the things that I want to do, for the things that I need to do, for the people that I interact with? My body feels different. You could hear my voice slows down a bit, my tone shifts a bit. I just feel calmer just by asking the question differently, having the focus of this question be grounded, be rooted in the way I want to experience the way I want to show up, as opposed to all that I need to get done and how I'm going to squeeze it all in. Viewing scheduling from this more experiential lens, it actually helps me to consider the various facets of my life and the various facets of myself and how I want that to be pieced together in my schedule. It helps me think differently, not just feel differently, but think differently. And as I do that, these are the things that I am considering. These are the things that I'm like, okay, this is what's important for me when I'm considering scheduling in this lens. The stuff for my kids, like the appointments, the school events, the sports activities, quality time together, because I don't want it to just be go, go, go all the time. I want us to be able to enjoy our time together as well. Work stuff, the phone calls, the emails, the documentation, the sessions, the trainings, the networking, studying and readying myself for being present with my clients, my own mental health stuff, whether that's doing yoga or taking a walk or reading or writing or meditating, making sure I'm drinking enough water, eating nutritious food, time to recenter myself and to decompress. Also, house stuff. So, getting the bills paid if they're not on automation. Some bills are, some bills aren't. Groceries, making sure that I have what I need to create the meals, and then also preparing the meals and getting the house cleaned, stuff for the dog, and so on and so forth. So, yes, I am using scheduling to help me navigate, help me manage all these different aspects of my life, but I am viewing how to manage them differently. I would be curious when you hear that and when you consider that, what comes up for you around that? Does it feel confusing? Are you curious about it? Are you doubtful of it? Skeptical, like, okay, how's that going to make a difference? Just notice kind of what reactions come up within you to that, because people do tend to have kind of strong reactions to scheduling based on their own experiences of it. And so your reactions are going to have an impact then on what you receive from this conversation today, and then also what you choose or don't choose to implement. So after I view these different facets of my schedule from this more experiential lens, I use a template that I made to view my day, my schedule in segments, and to write it down in these sections. It's just technically it's a 2-page template, but the schedule itself is only on the first page. On the back page, I have some other reflection pieces for myself. And you have access actually to that template if you would like to use it. The link is in the description. You're welcome to check it out and make it your own. But this template helps me to be very intentional about my scheduling, and I break it down in a more easy to digest way that helps me to be very clear about where I am focusing and why I am focusing there in any particular point of the day. I refer back to then this written schedule that I have for myself throughout the day, and it really helps me to feel more grounded, to feel more at ease, to feel more clear about where I'm focusing and why I'm focusing there, and that completely shifts the experience that I have with whatever it is that I'm doing. I know it sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But I'm telling you, you'd be surprised about how much approaching scheduling in this more purposeful way actually can affect your own mental health and your relationships in a positive way, in a healthy and helpful way, even though the focal point isn't in and of itself on just being productive like a robot. You actually do wind up feeling better and being even more effective with your productivity levels when you get in the groove of this kind of scheduling and making it work for you in the way that it works for you is going to be, right, different. It's going to be unique to you, custom to you, not necessarily the exact same way that it works for me and not exactly in the same way that I implement it. That's why I say make this your own and notice what comes up for you around this, because that's going to be the important golden nugget for you in this conversation. So not necessarily what I'm saying, but what comes up for you from what I'm saying in reaction to what I'm saying. So that's the first one. The second one that I want to share with you today, the second essential, the second fundamental that's really helping me day in and day out, is also one that you've probably heard before, but it's one that, again, I approach in a bit of a different way. I have a bit of a different perspective, a different spin on it. Um, in part because of my own experiences with struggling with it in the past, but also because I have just seen what can make it really challenging. So here it is. Asking for and accepting supports and figuring out a way to effectively communicate with them. That second part is really important. It's not just, oh, who could support me or what resources do I have? If we can't follow that up with like, how can I effectively implement it or how can I effectively communicate with the supports that I would like to have in place, then we're missing a huge piece. We need that piece, right? So this isn't necessarily new news for everyone, but it absolutely can be really hard to do. And I know I've had my struggles with it in the past, and some reasons that people struggle with asking for or receiving support might be might be, you don't have a large or local support system available to you, or B, you don't have a reliable network of support people available to you, or C, you have people who want to support you, but they don't really know how. Or D, the people that could support you cost resources that you don't have, like maybe money or energy. They require energy that you don't have because you or they really struggle to communicate with one another effectively, thereby rendering the support more of a stress than you would want it to be. And maybe that's because of boundary issues or assertion issues, or because of the history you have with that particular person, and that affects the way that you receive them or perceive them, or vice versa. It affects the way that they receive you or perceive you. I get it. 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 There's so many ways we could come up with like a comeback as to why this isn't going to work, how a different support or resource is not possible, how maybe we've tried everything or there is just nothing, and all the barriers in between. I don't think that we all have access to the same supports and resources. I don't think we do. And I also don't think that we can expect that everyone ever really will. Not in our lifetime, at least, right? Like, I don't think we can expect that everyone does or does not have access to the same supports or resources that we may or may not have access to ourselves. And I think that that is an important part of this conversation here. This conversation around supports is that we have to kind of be willing to be okay with that, to accept that your supports that are available to you and the challenges you may or may not have with them are just not going to be the same as another mom's, as another woman's. They're not. Like the supports and resources I have available to me aren't going to be the same as the ones that you do. And the ones I don't have available to me aren't going to be the same as the ones that you don't. And I had to learn to be okay with that, because we can have a tendency to get really resentful about what privileges other people do or don't have. And that just doesn't serve us to hold on to that resentment long term. We can get stuck in compare and despair. We can get really frustrated. And again, that just doesn't serve us long term. It's not helping put us in creative energy that allows us to come up with solutions for other creative supports or resources that may indeed help us. Right? I am very, very familiar with taking a ton on and getting a ton done on my own. And it did work for most of my life until it didn't anymore. It worked until I was no longer a single mom and I had multiple children. And now I was with a spouse who I was also parenting with, and we lived together, right? Things become more complex, relationships become more complex, and what used to work, it just doesn't work anymore. And so for a lot of busy, high achieving women, this kind of shift where like, oh, but I could handle it all on my own. I could do it all on my own. And now I'm still trying to do it all on my own, but it's not working the way it used to. That could cue a lot of mom guilt, a lot of frustration, a lot of resentment. And that is, of course, a valid emotion and experience for you to have, but it is going to keep you stuck if you stay in that energy, if you stay in that experience and we don't shift something, we don't change something. You're going to feel worse, right? And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for something different here. So I have had to learn the lesson way too often and sometimes very intensely that I just can't keep trying to do it all on my own all of the time anymore. And I can't deny that we really are not supposed to shoulder everything on our own all the time. Now, I do still try to do it sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, but I am usually very clearly and quickly reminded that it's not gonna work. This is not sustainable, hun. Right? Like I have to remind myself of that, and I get reminded of that if I get sucked back into that way of doing and being and existing. So figuring out how to ask for, allow, and effectively communicate with supports really is an essential. And so here are some hard truths that I had to work through in order to figure out this support thing. All right. I have got to find a way to communicate my wants, my needs, and expectations. I cannot keep it all in. This was a big one for me. And it's, again, still comes up for me. I'm not perfect. Some people, they have a habit of getting so frustrated with someone that's trying to ineffectively support them that they explode, right? They lash out. I tend to do the inverse of that and go quiet and eventually become resentful. And I do still catch myself doing this sometimes, much less now than I used to. But it does sometimes when I do it, it can give me the time and space that I need to decide, okay, this really isn't a big deal, Tony. It doesn't need to be directly confronted. You can let this roll. But often it is something that I do need to speak up about. It's not something that I should be just letting roll and keep quiet because it is something I'm going to feel resentful about if I don't say something about it. And so after some trial and error, I found different ways of communicating to help me communicate more effectively with different supports, and then also to help my supports feel like they're able to communicate with me more effectively, so to really open those lines of communication. And a couple of those ways might be, for example, if I'm feeling really highly triggered, then I might not go directly, face to face with my husband. If I'm feeling really highly triggered, I might first text him, especially because when I'm feeling really highly triggered, it's connected to past traumas for me, and I might not feel safe. So texting initially helps ease my nervous system, helps me feel a little bit safer so that I am feeling more prepared to have that face-to-face conversation when I am able to do that. And it also helps him to know that this is something that I am feeling very highly activated around. If I'm texting him about something that I'm feeling really highly triggered about, he knows that now. He knows that if I'm texting about this thing, this is something that Tony's feeling very strongly about. And so we both are more aware of how to enter into that conversation in a way that's going to be more helpful for both of us. I'm not saying I just text everything all the time. That's not the healthy avenue, right? For us to go, at least not long term. But in certain circumstances, that does become a way that can be more effective in communicating, and opens up the lines of communication for the next face-to-face conversation for us to have. or when a family member is watching my children on an ongoing basis. So I have my mother-in-law watches my kids one day, one of my work days. My mom watches my kids one of my other work days. And so we have a schedule going, right? One of the ways that works for me to be most effective in facilitating our open and mutual communication is to have something written out ahead of time, right? So rather than just feel frustrated that they are or aren't doing something the way I want them to with my children or in my house, when I outline, and I'm not talking some long 5-page long, right? Like directions. I am talking about a respectful length, just a 1 page, very clear, no passive aggressiveness, just very clear. This is the children's schedule. These are the expectations for the kids today. If there are any questions, please write them down here or you can text me. And so that written out form really helps us both to be able to communicate with us. Sometimes it's written out on a paper, sometimes it's in a text. It just depends on kind of what's going on during that season. So the summer that just ended, I sent it a lot via text, but I'm going to migrate back into paper now that the school season has begun again. Another thing that connects back to the idea of supports here is that even when I do communicate my wants, my needs, and expectations, I really have to find a way to handle it when things just don't go the way that I'd hoped. Right? Like just because we learn how to communicate our wants, hopes, needs, expectations doesn't mean that, okay, that means everyone's just going to deliver exactly how you want, exactly when you want. No, come on, right? That's not very possible. It's not practical. And also, it's not very kind because we aren't the bosses of everything. As much as sometimes it might feel like everything falls on us, we are not the bosses of everything. And we don't want to take that role on. We don't want to boss everyone else around. We want to be able to have open, clear communication. So there has got to be space for grace for myself and for other people. And I try to practice that on an ongoing basis. It really connects to my deep core values of how I want to show up in this world and how I want to live. And so I reconnect with that on an ongoing basis. Also, the last piece of this supports section is that I've got to be willing to get creative. Right? My supports do not look like other people's, as I've already said, and that's okay. My supports also look different now than they looked 14 years ago, and that's okay. Right? And so if I'm not willing to be creative about having different solutions for supports and resources in different seasons of my life with different wants and needs that I have, then I'm really going to find myself feeling stuck. And that sucks. Not a great feeling. Makes us feel like we're doing something wrong or no one cares or we're underappreciated or we just can't get ahead. And that feeling isn't going to help us feel successful in managing the various aspects of our life. So, getting creative means that we're not sitting in frustration and spewing over it all the time because everything is unfair for us. And it means we're not getting stuck in compare and despair. And it means that we're not trying to overdo it and putting everything back on our plate because no one else can do it the way we think they should, or no one else can do it because no one else cares the way that we do, or no one else, on and on and on. It means that we're going to put a pause on that. We still respect our emotions that come up and take time to process them and tend to them and communicate when and where we need to, right? But we're not going to get stuck in that emotion and that energy and that experience. We're also going to be willing and open to allow some space for creativity. Because when we're willing to allow some space for creativity within ourselves, our brain is in a position that it can more optimally help us come up with solutions. As opposed to feeling stuck, there's no access to that creativity flowing through our bones and our brains and our nervous system. And really, we aren't being very effective in moving forward, right? So we're not going to get stuck in a burnt out attitude. We're not going to get stuck in martyrdom. We're going to be willing to get creative with ideas. So for example, we are not in a current season of life where we're hiring a cleaning lady. We have hired a cleaning person before. And then we paused that during COVID, and we're not currently in a season of life where we are going to be hiring a cleaning person. We will be back in that season of life again, but in the meantime, there's cleaning that needs to happen, and I am not going to take it all on. Right? And so what does that mean? I need to get creative. I choose to get creative about ideas of how I can get the support that I need to not take all of that on and tap into the resources that are available to me. And so what did we do? We created a Sunday family cleaning day. All of the members of our family, except for the infant, they have an idea of tasks. Not an idea. They know which tasks are designated for them, and they execute them on Sunday. And they know what the expectations are. They know what day it is going to happen. And so together we are supporting one another. We're pulling our resources together to get things cleaned. You see how I had to get creative about that, and I also had to communicate my creative solution to my family. And then it did take, again, some evolution of us implementing that to find a way for that to work for us in our current season. And there will be ebb and flows over time as well. We'll see that shift. We'll see the tasks shift. They already have shifted over the years. And all of that is me kind of having some space for grace, having some flexibility, but also being very intentional about my schedule and very clear about asking for, receiving, and communicating with supports when I need them. So these are only two fundamentals: scheduling and support communication. But I lean upon them very heavily, and they help me to manage the many aspects of motherhood, of marriage, of my own mental health and work. And I talk a lot more about methods that I use to help me handle hard times, or to help me maintain when I'm in a good space, or to help challenge me when I need to be challenged. I talk a lot more about all of those things in my book, The Reset, A High Achiever's Guide to Freedom and Fulfillment. If you haven't checked it out, it is on Amazon. But I would like to hear from you. If you already have some essentials, some fundamentals that are coming up for mind for you that really work for you, that you want to lean heavier on, or you want to implement some of what we've talked about here today, tell me what works for you, or what are you willing to try on that maybe you haven't tried before, or you're willing to try differently. Share that with me in the comments below, or if you're touching base with me on a platform that asks polls or questions, you can go ahead and put that in there. I want to hear from you. I want to know what's working for you or what's not working for you, and what you're going to give a try, and see how you can feel more successful in managing yourself, your relationships as mom, as partner, as professional, and do so in a way that feels fulfilling for you, that feels practical for you, and that feels sustainable for you. Until next time, bye. Links related to this episode can be found in the show notes section. Want to submit questions about success, satisfaction, healing, and relationships, health, or work? You can do that free and anonymous at drtonywarner.com, where you'll find other resources there as well. Did you benefit from this episode? You can subscribe, like, and share with another to pass it on, because anyone can listen on the go with this podcast audio available on all major podcasting platforms.